Okay, it's been a while since I got back, since I posted anything or had any updates. That's partially because I hadn't been working on this too much. I got preoccupied, right, with other things. Anyway, so while I was gone, I think the biggest major thing I was working on was audio and dialogue. Basically, audio was something that was okay, but right now I'm running Linux, and I can't get some audio drivers to work well for some reason. So trying to get my dialogue system to actually play audio just doesn't work unless I'm on Windows, which is kind of not really preferable. But anyways, so I moved past that and decided to focus on the actual dialogue system, which is like right over here pretty much. And I actually managed to get something done. Hold on, let me show you. So, you have the text box down here. Just pretty much just an image. Displays text over time. And everything still works on here. It just takes up some real estate. I can fix that, right? Because these text boxes aren't going to be on all the time. They're just going to be on whenever you want, and I might have, like, the camera focus just like zoom in a bit on the characters. But realistically, you'd be talking to this NPC and the text box would come on. Right? I might just zoom in on YouTube or something. Anyways, you can go on to the next line by pressing A. Right? And it'll play the next line by line, one character at a time, until it's done. And you can just press A to move on to the next one. I do plan on making it like time, so maybe after like 1 or 2 seconds, it'll automatically move to the next line. Maybe not. I'm not sure. So yeah, it just cycles through, and I'll just explain how the actual script works. So basically, each conversation is stored in a JSON file full of like indexes, and each index has each element in the index. Okay, so here we go. It just loops right back around. That's how it's working right now. So it's cycling through all the indexes, all the dialogues in the conversations, and it reads out the script, like the thing that the actual character would say. Right? So if we exit out of there and we go to conversation.json, from here, this is the entire conversation. This entire thing over here. So from the top, we have the conversation over here. This is the first index. I mean, this is the first set of dialogue. It tells us a few things, like who the speaker is. In this case, is just a fill-in-the-blank character, right? And then it tells us what they actually say, which is the line, their line, right? So it's like, okay, once they're these rich fat cats, blah 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 blah. Then it moves on and goes to the next one, and it does the same thing. So it checks who the character is, and then it reads their line. What I plan on is basically, if you guys ever played Undertale, you know that, or like Celeste is another game that does it too. Basically, in the dialogue system, it shows an icon or like a picture or something of the character who's speaking, actually speaking, or just their face next to the dialogue, and it'll have their sound effect or them speaking as the dialogue plays. I want something like that. So this will be the variable that stores which character is talking. Based on this, it'll show which icon or picture to display, like who to display, and whose sound effect to play for each thing. I'm planning on making my dialogue system sound like Undertale, so you'll have like that one sound effect that just repeats every single time a letter is reiterated. Anyways, other than that, that's that so far. And other than the other things that might happen during a dialogue is player input, right? So that might include a prompt. So maybe something you have to type in the keyboard, like, oh hey, what's your name? And then you go and you type your name in. Or a choice between like two options, like yes or no, and the player would have to choose one of those two. Stuff like that. That's pretty much it. And then it just goes through these one at a time for a conversation. Basically, it's just like might trigger a conversation, and then it'll just go through all these lines. Some of them require clear input, some of them don't. So, that's all how it works. What is this? Oh, this is just notes file. Anyways, this thing over here is the actual dialogue system. So in each text box, it will try to display everything in one line. If it can't, because obviously you don't export the screen, which is bad, then it will try to display that on the second line. So what happens is, I should put this somewhere else. Anyways, so what happens is it first reads from the JSON file, and it's like, here, let me go to the while loop. So it goes over here, shows lines. So it tries to show the lines. So over here it goes in, it checks if the first line, because the first, I'm pretty bad at explaining right now, but the first line and the second line are empty strings that are variables, right? And this is the line limit, how many characters per line. So it checks if the first line is an empty string. If it is, then take the first index of the message variable, which is pretty much this line over here, right? It takes this as the message variable, and it's like, okay, if the first line is an empty string, then just take the first index and add it onto line 1, and then that's that, right? And then it just goes on and it repeats to the next loop, right? So then afterward, this condition is not fulfilled because now line 1 is not an empty string. So it goes on up here, and it's like, it checks if the line limit is greater than, I didn't comment that properly. It checks if line 1 is greater than or equal to the line limit. So if the length of line 1, let's say we started off with a message, and the first iteration we added on O. So line 1 now equals O, right? So we check the length of that, which is obviously 1. And if that is greater than or equal to the line limit, which is 90, obviously it's not, but if it is, then we would that would be an indicator to start using this line, the second line, right? But otherwise, just keep on adding a character onto line 1 until eventually we satisfy this condition. So it would go through the iteration, and we just we start showing lines. So show line 1, O, and then you add an N, C, E, T, blah 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 blah, all the way to the over here, to the end of the message, in which we would either clear it, or line 1 equals the line limit, the character limit, and in that case, then it looks to end on a word, on the end of a word. And obviously you don't want it to go onto the second line in the middle of a word, which is bad, obviously, because then you're just going to have it cut off. It's exactly what you don't want. But it tries to end it on a word, and then it returns line 1, and then that's an indicator to go into line 2. So if line, okay, I should just do a line checker. So what happens is, I'm going to show lines. So what happens is, normally this is what's happening. It creates line 1, and then it makes the text, it renders the text. Then it does the same with line 2. Normally, while line 1 isn't complete, and it's shorter than the line limit, then line 2 will just return nothing, right? Afterward, through line 1, as line 1 goes along, once it hits that limit, then line 1 will stop updating, right? And line will just stay how it is. That's where this comes in, where it checks line 1. So line 1 is returned, and then this returns line 1 again, just to keep track of line 1, right? And then we iterate back again. Line 1 will change to a different variable, while this is in the previous iteration. So line 2, what line 2 does is it checks if line 1 and the line 1 checker are the same. If they're not the same, meaning that line 1 is currently being updated and still iterating through, then just return. Don't do anything. This is why line 2 never does anything, right? Actually, I'll run it again later. But however, if this isn't the case, if line 1 and line checker are the same, meaning that line 1 hasn't been updated in the past iteration, then we're going to go on and check this stuff. We'll see if line 2 is empty. If it's an empty string, which by default it is, then we add on, we continue where line 1 left off, and start adding on to line 2. And we keep doing that until we finish the message. From there, once we're done all of that, we pretty much just draw it to the screen. So what happens in here is, okay, so it creates the dialogue, creates the message, it draws the text box onto the screen, and then it sets like a timer. So that way that the text doesn't update every single frame, but instead it updates maybe every, in this case, 0.05 seconds, right? So 0.05 seconds, it'll add on another letter to the text, and so on and so on and so on, until the message is complete. In which case, and it does that, right? And then if the line is complete, or we're on a frame, because this executes every single frame, and it's not always going to update the text every single frame. So if the text is complete, or the current frame doesn't update anything, then we just draw what we already had. We draw the text and the lines that we already had, we leave it at that, right? So once it clears through the message, then we check clear lines. From here, if you press the letter A, then it will clear line 1 and line 2 and move on to the next dialogue. I talked y'all's ear off a bit too much, kind of nerded out, but you can kind of see what happens. So, you know, line 1 exists, line 2 exists, they both exist, just it's still an empty string for line 2. And it keeps on going, it fulfills this line until the method's finished. So there's nothing to put onto line 2 anyway. But if we go to the next one, it will continue until, line 1 will continue until it reaches the line limit, and then it starts updating line 2, right where line 1 left off. And it just keeps going until it finishes the message. And it'll keep on doing that. Anyways, you might have noticed the text box. I should probably launch again. Okay, so you can see the text box is like blue, gray. That's just a PNG, right? And then text itself is white, and it's like some basic font. I do plan on putting in my own font, make some better text boxes, and then basically add in like choices. So you can choose this text box, you can choose another text box, maybe a dark mode text box. You can choose all kinds of them, and they will look different. And then I think they'll also try to extend it in modular so you can add in new ones easily. That also means that you, the player, can just pretty much go in, put in like a PNG file of a font file, and then just make your own config file for a font, and then add it on. And then the game will automatically detect it, and just, you know, display your text that the way you want. That's what I want to make everything very modular. And I've kind of figured out the system, I've figured out the dialogue system, and, you know, font system, it's all going pretty well. That's the progress. After this I have like a few things. Let me check the okay. After I had a note file somewhere. Okay, so after this I had a few things planned. Like adding I have to actually add in choices and the prompts. Like right now it's in theory, it's in the algorithm, but I haven't actually done it. I haven't actually implemented it in. I have to add in I have to fix the audio. I have to add in an icon display. I want to change the camera angles and make it zoom in. I want to add stuff like a foreground. Like if you've seen in Hollow Knight or Celeste, in some games you'll have a foreground which looks kind of layered. So one will move with the character so it doesn't appear to move, but another one will kind of move as you move. I'd have to find footage, but it just makes it look so much cooler. I want to add a bunch of other cool things into here. But yeah, I have school coming up in September, and a job maybe within like 2 weeks-ish. So, you know, school's getting, mine's gonna get busy. But, you know, I'll try to keep, you know, updated onto this a bit better than